Hello and welcome to Cinema Wellman. I'm your host, David, and January ends today. So we're already about 8% through 2026, which is frightening, but it's right because, math. Today we're going to be looking at the best and worst of this first month of the new year. And as I mentioned at the end of the last episode, this one should be pretty short, but you never know because I'm so long-winded. Not that we didn't try to, we always try here at Cinema Wellman. We ended up screening 61 films during the month, but a vast majority of them failed to move the needle drastically in either direction. Not a total waste of time, of course. Watching movies rarely, but just not a lot that I felt needed to be shared with you here today. Then, factor into that the fact that the Oscar nominations just came out last week, which means I'm now on full AA watch for the foreseeable future. Academy Awards, chat. So, AA watch for the foreseeable future, attempting to screen as many nominated films before the envelopes are opened on March 15th. That means any nominated films I screened, good or bad, are not eligible for this episode since they'll be discussed down the road during one of our 2 annual Oscar episodes. That means I'm not going to talk about Zootopia 2 today, although I loved it. So when the dust finally settled, we ended up with 2 movies we're going to complain about and a handful that are worth a look. Let's start where we always do, La Ventura, and that's at the bottom. Today's bottom is a World War II propaganda short directed by a favorite director of ours, proving that you can't win them all. From 1943, you, John Jones, ! Approved. 11 minutes. I only had the last 11 minutes. IMDb says 6.5, directed by Mervyn LeRoy. Propaganda is defined as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a particular cause, doctrine, or point of view. A side note, my first year teaching at the Hudson Memorial School in Hudson, New Hampshire, my contract that I signed, there was a statement in it that stated that I was not going to teach the communist doctrine in my classroom. 1988. I love that. All right, propaganda. Back to propaganda. It's been around since circa 515 BCE, and I'm positive it's here to stay. And there's a reason for that. It appears to work on some people. Always has, always will, unfortunately. And in case you were thinking this game was only played by the major league, the Nazis and the Russians, you'd be incorrect, since America is also very good at this dirty little game. Most of America's propaganda I'm referring to surrounds World War II, as does this short bit of USA, USA, rah, 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 that blends propaganda with an old-fashioned guilt trip. James Cagney, who I love, stars as John Jones, a father and factory worker who was also part of his town's civil defense program. While at his post, Jones begins to feel a bit silly protecting the area since no air raids invade America. Like, are we hoping for that? Then we get a dream sequence involving God and a bunch of vignettes involving non-American children and what if this was your baby, John Jones, your baby? Enough. And let's leave God out of this. And please don't make him narrate it. I read that this was MGM Studios' contribution to United Nations Week, which adds to the feeling that this was a required project that everyone just mailed in, for the war effort, Next up is a movie I watched because I like Christina Ricci, and I like John Cusack. And I should have known better since this movie's 8 years old and I've never heard of it. From 2018, Distorted. Rated R, 86 minutes. IMDb, 4.4. Directed by Rob W. King. IMDb says a couple moves to an isolated, modern, safe apartment building with closed-circuit television after the wife has problems with nightmares. However, something's not quite right with the building. Now, it seems like I've seen a bunch of these movies recently in which there's a new dwelling that the inhabitants assume is safe, yet it is sinister. I usually end up rooting for the dwelling in these films, but I also usually understand those movies as well. This was originally titled Distortion, and that would not have made a difference. Ricci's character and her nasty, unsympathetic husband move in, and she begins seeing and hearing things that are upsetting. Then there were all sorts of subliminal messages coming her way, which I became interested in. Maybe the director was sneaking in single frames reading, "Keep watching," or "You like this movie." This was mostly nonsense to me because I was never satisfied with who the bad people were, why they were doing these things, poor Christina Ricci, and what happened when they were exposed. John Cusack's character is absurd. Cusack's given top billing and doesn't even bother to show up until 42 minutes into the movie. And his final scene was so silly, I actually had to go back. I had to rewind it and make sure I didn't miss something. Okay, so that's not too bad for the worst of the month. Let's look at the 5 eligible films we'd like to talk about in a positive way. You got to keep watering those positive cinematic seeds. From 1949, Brothers in the Saddle, approved 60 minutes, IMDb 6.3, directed by Leslie Salander. Now, I've become a big fan of the B-movie, films that were meant to be shown as the lesser-known second half of a double feature at the old-time cinemas. Think of it like the B-side of a record, like Hey, Hey, What Can I Do being the B-side to Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. So B-movies didn't have the big budgets or the big stars, but they certainly were to the point, usually about an hour, and a lot of them were certainly entertaining. I chose Brothers in the Saddle to talk about, but I'm really speaking about the now 8 or 9 Tim Holt movies I've seen recently. All B-movies, all Westerns, all in around an hour, and all a lot of fun. Tim Holt was a top Western star during the 40s and early 50s, making 46 B-Westerns for RKO Pictures between 1940 and 1952. Holt made 29 of those Westerns with his sidekick, Chico Jose Gonzalez Bustamante Rafferty, an Irish-Mexican cowboy played by Richard Martin. Holt and Martin together are a lot of fun. Cheeto is most certainly the sidekick in these movies, but he and Holt are seen as equals, and Holt is never condescending or dismissive, which can sometimes happen when sidekicks are involved. I also like that the Holt Westerns never cast Native Americans as the villains, and they stick to the land barons and the cattle rustlers and the other outlaws to portray the people with the black hats. This film, for example, was about Tim's brother going bad, and it did not end the way I thought a little B-Western from 1949 would end, which was nice. The next 2 films were both from my research for our last episode, Film Composers of Note, and before I mention either of these titles, they are must-sees if you are at all interested in movie music. These 2 films were also the source of much of the information I shared with you last episode. First up, we have from 2016, Score. Not rated, 93 minutes, IMDb 7.5, directed by Matt Schrader. IMDb simply states, a look at the cinematic art of the film musical score and the artists who create them. I won't go into too much depth on Score or the next film documentary since they are about film composers and we just spent an entire episode celebrating 8 of the best ever. Suffice to say that Score gives viewers a fabulous behind-the-scenes look at one of the most important parts of the movies we love. It also highlights some of the younger, up-and-coming film composers that I didn't cover during our last episode. And our second film composer documentary we highly recommend is about the GOAT himself. It's titled Music by John Williams from 2024, rated PG, 105 minutes, IMDb 8.2, directed by Laurent Bozereau. This is one of the best documentaries I have ever seen about film and filmmaking. Director Laurent Bozereau has certainly caught my attention recently. 3 of his film documentaries are among my recent favorites, and all have been discussed here, Becoming Hitchcock, The Legacy of Blackmail, Jaws at 50, The Definitive Inside Story, and now Music by John Williams. Bozereau is phenomenal. I can't wait to see who he has on tap next. It doesn't hurt that he seems to land directly in my wheelhouse with his subject matter, but he's still an amazing documentarian. He has a short documentary about Twister and Twister's Legacy, so I have to screen that and watch that with Vanessa at some point. It doesn't matter how much you know about John Williams or the films he's scored. This is an amazing look at one of the most talented people ever to be associated with the film industry. And Williams' music isn't only recognizable in movie theaters. He also composed 4 different Olympic themes, and the Olympics are starting this week, opening ceremonies, right? Friday. He wrote that, and he wrote the theme for NBC News. And there's so many great stories about it. A favorite story of mine about his successful collaborations with Steven Spielberg is when Spielberg asked Williams to compose the score for Schindler's List. John Williams came back to Spielberg and said, you know what, you need a better composer than me for such a powerful film. And Spielberg replied, I know, but they're all dead. I mentioned a beautiful quote by Steven Spielberg about John Williams in our last episode. And here's another. And this is so beautiful, I think. Steven Spielberg said, quote, without John Williams, bikes don't really fly, nor do brooms in Quidditch matches, nor do men in red capes. There is no force. Dinosaurs do not walk the earth. We do not wonder. We do not weep. We do not believe. End quote. Amen. Next up is a film I screened because of a work conversation about Kevin Bacon, as in Jen saying to me, wait, you like Kevin Bacon, but you've never seen Stir of Echoes from 1999, rated R, 99 minutes, IMDb 6.9, directed by David Koepp. IMDb says, a man has visions of a missing neighborhood girl. So yes, I do like Kevin Bacon, and yet this film evaded me for a quarter of a century. I found Stir of Echoes to be an entertaining suspense thriller / psychological horror film. I kind of figured out part of it early, but that didn't prevent me from enjoying the rest of the movie. Bacon plays a normal guy with a normal family and a normal job until he is hypnotized by his sister-in-law at a party. That's when things start to go sideways. The sister-in-law is played by the always fabulous Illeana Douglas, who I love in everything. Have you seen To Die For? If not, put that on a short list. Good stuff. I was reading that this film didn't get the attention it may have deserved because it was released around the same time as The Sixth Sense. There's a film I figured out really early, and it did kind of ruin the whole experience, but that's on me. I enjoy movies that deal with displaced spirits looking for closure and a final peaceful resting place. I really feel bad for them, and I hope that never happens to my spirit, but I do enjoy movies about them. And our final film today was recommended by my 2-year-old great-nephew, Lincoln, who had me screen it because he enjoys the animals. Lincoln's first movie recommendation to me, and it makes a best of the month list and episode? Excellent start, my friend. We're going to expect good things from you now. It's from 1963. It's titled The Incredible Journey, rated G, 80 minutes, IMDb 7.0, directed by Fletcher Markle. That's such a great name, Fletcher Markle. IMDb tells us 2 dogs and a cat set off on a treacherous 200-mile journey towards home. When I dog-sat Nora, I screened 2 Homeward Bound movies and was all set to rewatch one of them to celebrate Lincoln on his 2nd birthday, part of the 2026 Birthday Project Wildcard, when I found out that one of those movies was a remake of this film, The Incredible Journey from 1963. Which is why the title of the Sally Field, Michael J. Fox, and Don Amici voiced movie is titled Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey. And while I enjoyed that film and its sequel, Homeward Bound 2, Lost in San Francisco, this 1963 original is my favorite. And before I'm accused of being that anti-remake broken record, I have a reason. Nothing against Field, Fox, and Amici, but this original version, remember, these are all live action, not animation. This original version does not have the animals talking to one another. Instead, there's a Disney narrator telling us things like, "This curious little guy has run into some trouble with that den of vicious wolverines." I much prefer that option. The nature, animals, and scenery are excellent in both, but I don't need Mama Gump talking to Marty McFly and Mortimer Duke to enjoy the scenery. I will say that these three animals, Siamese cat, bull terrier, and a golden retriever, are put through the ringer in parts of this. At one point, a cat finds itself in a raging river. The poor kitty is struggling to keep its head above the rapids, which was kind of terrifying. Did the budget include stunt cats? Bring in the stunt cats, right? Well, that is a wrap for our recap of the best and worst of January. Always a mixed bag, just like the New England weather. Outside of the Cinema Wellman studio, it's 5 degrees right now. We hope you join us on Super Bowl Sunday, next Sunday, for a special Wellman Bowl football movie special. All the great football movies packed into one episode, kicking off next Sunday, February 8th. You can watch while you pregame. And until then, take care.